Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining in for our live session on MLOps mastery. So, folks, I have heard you guys. So, we have heard with so many feedbacks. And first of all, I'm grateful for all the feedbacks and the suggestions that you're telling us because that's actually helping us to help you serve you better, guys. So, most of you have requested that a deep dive into the MLOps, which is going to be helpful for everyone. So, here it is. So, this is our session one of multiple sessions that will be starting with you on this MLOps. Now, the idea of this session is to give you a full stack knowledge of what exactly is this MLOps, how is it beneficial for us, and more importantly, how you can learn this MLOps in a right way. Now, with AI, with more and more companies are implementing the machine learning models, we see a great gap between the industry requirement and the professional level. So this session is to help you to cover that gap and more importantly, you mastering this MLOps in this critical period so that you can be yourself and get the most of this learning journey. Okay. Now, this session is, I just want to let you know that this is a video series and we'll be keeping these sessions in depth. Now, you can check out the sessions at a later point as well, and it is available on the portal. Whatever the notes that I'll be using, it will be available for you. Once the session is completed, you can just scan the QR code that you are seeing on the screen. You can just scan the QR code and access the learning content, guys. So that's how you can access the source code and the notes that in which that we will be sharing as we progress in the learning journey. Okay, so let's get started, guys. So let's start by understanding an important element. What exactly is this MLOps and how it actually works? Now, let me remove the other aspect. So a quick confirmation screen team. So I hope you can hear my voice and see my screen. If yes, please confirm yes by typing in the chat window. So please confirm by tapping in as yes if you're able to hear my voice and see my screen. Just to reconfirm since I've shared the screen. Okay, perfect, guys. Thank you so much for the confirmation. So let's get started and let's start by understanding why MLOps and what is so special about it. See, if we talk about anything in general, okay, so when we think about any system, and let's say there is an issue at the system, let's say it can be any software system or it could be any machine learning system. Like for our discussion, I'm going to consider a machine learning system. Now, whenever we have any machine learning system, if there is any inefficiency in the system, it's not because of one aspect. An inefficiency in any system is actually a result or an outcome of I'll say, a web of incorrect decisions which have occurred over the period of time. And that's what has caused an inefficiency in any system. Now, when we look into inefficiency in any system, it's always tempting to think that let me fix that simple element. If I'm considering a machine learning, let me fix that pipeline or let me fix the model. Let me use a specific, the great model that has been released by OpenAI or Facebook team. Let me use that and that's going to solve all my system problems. But rarely, whether it's in our IT system or in our real life, nothing of this quick fixes would work. Now that's where the MLOps would come into picture. Now, when I say MLOps is a continuous improvement for all the business activities. So you can think of this in this way. So when we consider the machine learning system, okay, we always come across various moving parts in a machine learning system. So for example, in a machine learning system, I'll have my data set, I'll have my algorithm, I'll have some feature engineering that takes place on this data set. I'll say feature engineering aspect, and I'll have other aspects such as training of these algorithms that I've chosen earlier. Okay, after the training, we'll have the deployment and monitoring. So these are the various aspects that we would come across whenever we are training any machine learning model. Now, when I say MLOps, it's about having a continuous improvement element across all these various aspects of a machine learning system. Okay. I can call this MLOps as the combination of machine learning plus operation. It's a process and the practices which we use it for designing, building, enabling, and even supporting the efficient deployment of the machine learning models in a production environment. Now, the reason that we want the efficient deployment and efficient system present because that's going to help us to drive the business outcome. So you can, for simplicity, you can think of this MLOps as DevOps, like DevOps practices for the machine learning. That's what is that's what is actually about the MLOps. Okay. Now, when we talk about implementing the MLOps at the enterprise level, so it's very important that we understand everything at the enterprise level. See, when we think about implementing any solutions at the enterprise level, it should be building the system which is dependent on the process and not dependent on the people. I'll give you a very simple example as why this is important at the enterprise level. Let's say we have a company A. Okay. Let's assume that we have a company A, and this company A is currently implementing some practices. And what they have made up is they have actually made use of a star performer. Okay, I'm going to call it as an employee X of that company A. So what this person has done is, since this person is a star employee of that company, he went ahead and created an overall solution for their machine learning deployment or their machine learning system. Now, once this solution has been implemented by this, let's say, employee X, now the company is having some crazy benefits. Now they are having the crazy benefit of they're seeing more revenue, they're seeing much bigger impact in their businesses. Now, what happens is after a period, now this employee X is going to leave this company A. Now, when that happens, think about the system that this person has built. It will be difficult for company to manage. And because of this dependent system, okay, the entire company has to build it together. Like whatever the progress that they have made, then they'll have to create or recreate the same system. So that means this solution that has been implemented like a chance, like somehow someone has given that chance and we started like using it in our business. But when that is over, we are the cost that it comes that they have to bear is very high. That means when we are thinking about building at the enterprise level, we need to be able to think about building a system. Okay, building a system which is not only a process driven but also a standard such that it is easier to maintain, and more importantly it's not dependent on the people but more dependent on the tools. So that's what we talk about when we say building the MLOps at the enterprise level. Okay, now when we think about performing this MLOps, okay, so as I mentioned, it's like applying the DevOps principles on the machine learning project. But here in this case, there are various difference between the MLOps and DevOps. But one of the major difference that I can say right now, when we talk about the difference between the MLOps and DevOps is we call it as the data drift. So data drift is one of the key I'll say, a difference between the traditional DevOps and the MLOps. Now, what exactly is this data drift? See, what happens in the case of machine learning is whatever the model that we train, it is dependent on the data that we have used. So let's say this is the model that I've built. So this model has been built is dependent on the data set that I have used for training. Now, once the model has been trained and once I have deployed in my production system or in my production environment, there can be a scenario where the new data that I'm receiving in the production environment is very different than the data that I've used during the training. Now, when this happens, we will say that a data drift has occurred, which means the properties of the data that we have before the training is like I'll say, like during the training, the property of the data that we have during the training is very different than the data version or the property of the data that we see right now. That's where we call it as the data drift has happened. Okay, that's the overall idea about the difference between the DevOps and MLOps at a very high level. We also have various other differences, but I'm going to say this is one of the major difference between the DevOps and MLOps. Now that you have learned about what exactly is this MLOps and the difference between MLOps and DevOps, now let's proceed ahead, guys. So here, let's proceed ahead and understand what are all the stages that we have in the MLOps. So let's take a look into that. So let's take a look into the stages of MLOps. What are the various stages that we would be having? Now, when we talk about MLOps, there are four important components. The first component that we have is data collection and data preparation. And the second component is model development. And training. This is the second important component of MLOps. And the third component of MLOps, I can call it as the ML deployment. We call it as ML service deployment. And the fourth stage in MLOps is continuous monitoring and feedback. So these are the four important components of MLOps. So let's understand each of these stages in detail, because once you understand this, it becomes easier for you to master this MLOps, guys. This is one of the critical aspects that you need to know. So what happens in a typical machine learning project? See, what happens in a typical machine learning project is we always start with the goal. Like we always start with a business goal. Like for example, I want to build a machine learning model which can help me to uh, tell me whether I have whether I can approve the credit card application or not. Like it always starts with a business goal. Okay. Now, once this goal has been defined, the next thing that we will do is we will go ahead and we will collect the data. Like for example, uh, suppose if I'm building an application or a system which will help me to approve or reject the credit card application, that's my business goal. I would go ahead and collect and prepare the data for this goal. Like, for example, I'm going to check my banking database. I will check my previous credit card applications and its status, like what was the details of the previous customers where the bank have approved and not approved. Now, once I've collected and prepared the data, I'll go ahead and I'll build a model, I'll train the model, and then I would go ahead and deploy the model. Now, once this is done, once we deploy it, we are going to integrate it with the application that we have got. Now, this integration can be anything. Like this can be integrating with the front end where Maybe we'll make use of some HTML or CSS or similar web-based interface front end. We'll integrate that front end with our backend machine learning model. Or I can create the front end with some Python libraries and make it live on the production. So that's what the integration with the application is all about. Or to give you an example, suppose if I'm building a machine learning for Amazon, so I'm going to integrate my machine learning model to the Amazon app. So that's what the meaning of integration. Then the next step is we are going to monitor it. We'll do the monitoring, and while doing the monitoring, we'll check whether this model that we have built, whether it is in alignment with the business goal that we have set. So this is how our various stages in a machine learning project would look like. Now, what happens when we focus on only one area of the project? Like, for example, let's say in a traditional scenario, or what we have seen people doing it as in a machine learning projects, I've seen the employees or the folks in a team, they focus only on the building of the machine learning model. Now, when they focus only on building of the best possible model, instead of focusing on the entire scenarios, so what they might end up is I've seen folks using a very wrong data set. Now, if they don't use a wrong, if they don't use a right data set, then the model that they're going to build, it's going to have an incorrect answers. And in some cases, because of not having the enough data, they're unable to build a model. Now, in some scenarios, they are so focused on building the model, and once they have built the model, they would realize that there's no practical way to integrate their machine learning model to their front end. And once they realize that, okay, these machine learning projects costs are higher, then in worst case scenarios, I've seen this happening in various companies as well. They will just shut down that machine learning project itself. I'm sure you might have experience in your own organization as well. Without the proper planning, like you might have seen that they will suddenly hire few teams, they will suddenly hire new employees to the organization, and they will try to make it run for a few months. And after that, they'll just shut that entire business or a group or entire team itself, and they'll say that, okay, you guys start working in a different domain. Now, this is going to happen when the team focuses only on the model building and not on the entirety of the solution that they are looking at. Okay. So that's one of the key things that we have to remember. If we just focus on only model, these are the challenges that we would come across. So once they have the goal and once you prepare the data, which is in alignment with the goal, then we would go ahead and building the model would actually make sense. Okay. Now here, when I say building the model, there are various ways in which we build the model, and this model building is dependent on the end goal that we have got. Okay. I'll tell you with some examples so that you'll have an idea. So here, depending on the data set, so you would, in a machine learning standpoint, so we will either perform the classification. Sometimes we perform the regression. It can be clustering. If it is an unlabeled data, sometimes I'll be using the clustering. In some cases, it is dimensionality reduction. Dimensionality reduction. It can be dimensionality reduction, or it can be transformers and generative AI. It can be Gen AI. So it can be anything. Like we can use any of these techniques to find the pattern in the data. Okay. So this decision of choosing which approach is dependent on the type of data and the goal that we are trying to achieve. Like, for example, if my goal is to build a system which will help me to tell me whether I have to approve the credit card application or not, That's a simple task of classification. So the prerequisite is I need to have the data to perform this classification. Suppose my end goal is to help the customers with their queries in natural language. Then in such scenario, maybe I'll be using the generative AI model, like I'll be using the model such as GPT. If my end goal is to decide, okay, to which category that I have to put this particular customer to, then that could be a clustering. So the decision of choosing of model is always dependent on the goal and the data that we have got. Okay. So I'll tell you, just repeat this so that everyone is on the same page. So when we talk about the overall machine learning project, these are the various steps that we have. We'll first define the business outcome, then we'll collect and prepare the data. Third one is we'll build and deploy the model. Now, this building and deploying the model is dependent on the type of the data that we are dealing with. Then, once we build the model, we'll deploy the model. So, generally, whenever we are building this model, okay, what we also do is we will create something called as a pipeline. Okay, we will create something called as a pipeline. So when I say pipeline, it's basically the sequence of steps that has to be performed in order to arrive at this build model or the built model that we have got. So that is basically sequence of steps that we have to go through from data collection such that at the end we are going to end up with a trained machine learning model. And finally, we are going to deploy the model. Now, when I say deploy model right here, it's basically ensuring that this model that we are trying to that we are trying to use it, it is available for the end users. That's what we call it as the model deployment step. Okay, so let me just give you a full pipeline as how it actually look like so that you'll get a clear perspective as like how various elements would come in and what are the key things that you have to be aware of, especially from the perspective of MLOps. See, when we talk about the MLOps in this scenario, so specifically, yeah, okay. So specifically, if we talk about the overall pipeline, let me just mention it in this way. So we have mentioned that we'll collect and prepare the data, right? Now, at this step, we actually have multiple sub-steps. So what are those multiple sub-steps? So here in this multiple sub-steps, the first step that we would be having is, okay, so here in this case, the first step that we do is we call it as data ingestion. I'm going to ingest the data. So when I say data ingestion, it's basically whatever the data that I'll be having from various sources. Now, these sources can be my database. Now, these sources can be the point of sale system, and these sources can be their mobile devices real-time update, whatever the data sources that I'll have. Okay, I'll get all those data sources and I'll place the data sources and I'll store it in a single place. That's called as a data ingestion. And this ingested data is called as a raw data. Now the reason that we call it as a raw data because it is just a dump of data from various sources. Now, once I have this raw data, here I would go ahead and perform some kind of pre-processing on this raw data such that we are going to prepare the important features, or I'm going to call it as the clean data. Now, once I have this clean data, then what we will do is this is what you would be seeing in the pipeline as well. So then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll perform the training. So here in this scenario, maybe I'll be making use of models such as XGBoost or similar models. I'll go ahead and perform the training. Now, once the training is completed, what I will be having is a trained model. I'll call this as trained model. Now, on this trained model, what we then do is we are going to perform the evaluation. So this will be here. So we'll perform the evaluation. Evaluation is nothing but testing how well my model is working. Then once the evaluation is completed, we will then go ahead and deploy this. Okay, we would then go ahead and deploy the model. So we will deploy the model to some API. This is a common way in which we deploy the model, guys. Okay, so when I say creation of machine learning pipeline, this diagram that you're seeing right here, this is how a machine learning pipeline would look like. So pipeline is nothing but a sequence of steps that is being happening and which we are performing in a sequential order. Like here in this case, I'm getting the data, I'm performing the pre-processing, generating the features, training the model. Once I've got the trained model, I'll perform the evaluation, deploying to the endpoint. So this is called as a pipeline. Okay. And this is what you would be working with when you are working with any machine learning project. And when we are building any system or building any solution, we should not be stuck in one step. We should be having a clear understanding as how we are going to do all these steps together when we can realize the benefit of these machine learning systems. And here, when we are performing this pre-processing right here, I'll just give you some technical details because this is something that you need to be aware of, and this is something that you would generally come across in your MLOps project. So here in this pre-processing, you would come across some common steps and common preparation. So let me just take you through some of the common preparation that we'll be doing or the pre-processing that we'll be doing when we are working with the data. So when I say pre-processing, I'm going to apply some techniques on this raw data so that I can convert it into the clean data. This is what a pre-processing would mean. Now here in this case of the any machine learning project, the common pre-processing or the common changes that we do it on the data in this pre-processing step is the first step, I'm going to call it as the drop. We'll drop rows or columns on the data set. Okay, I'm going to drop rows or columns in the data set. So whenever we are having any missing values in any data, suppose if I have 100 columns and if 20 columns doesn't have any data, if it just has majority of rows over there is missing values, in some cases we'll drop the rows, in some cases we'll drop the columns itself. That's what we mean by dropping the rows or column. And in some cases, we will perform an activity called imputation. So when I say imputation, it's a technique where I'm going to replace whatever the values that is missing with some constant value. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a customer, like let's say what you have done is you have one handheld device. Okay, let's assume that this is the device that is used by salespeople or sales employee. So what they do is whenever they meet customers, they are going to mention the customer details. Now, for some reason, there's a field called age. Now, there are some customers who are willingly to share their age, and for some customers, they don't share their age. So, what the salespeople will do is they will just leave it as blank. Now, because of some system issue, whenever it is being saved into a database, whenever the value is missing, it is getting saved as -999. Like for some reason, weird reason, the system is saving this blank value as -999. Now, when you're working and when you're preparing the data for machine learning, when you come across such values which are missing value or which doesn't make sense, we will apply a logic such that it would make sense. Like here in this example for imputation, I'm going to say that as wherever there is minus 999, replace it with 0. And that's what we call it as the imputation. So imputation is nothing but replacing the missing values with a constant or statistical value. It can be a missing value in some cases, or in some cases, it can be incorrect values. That's what we call it as an imputation. Then under pre-processing step, so we will also perform the outlier detection. So when I say outlier detection, it's about checking whether my values in the data set actually make sense or not. Like for example, for us for the age column, some sales representative has mentioned the customer age as 175. Now the question is that a real one or not? So obviously, it's not a realistic one. So in some scenarios, we will remove those outlier values or the incorrect values from the data set. And to detect whether it is an outlier or not, whether it is a correct value or not, so we perform this outlier detection. Okay. Then what we also have, or the other technique that we have here is binning. Binning is nothing but categorizing the data. Okay. I might have some values in the data set, but I want to go ahead and prepare the bins. Like I'll give you an example. Let's say we'll consider the same column of age. I have the customer age over here with me, which is basically 21, 22, 33, 35, 42, 46, something like this. I have the customer age. Now, instead of having these absolute values, maybe the better for me is instead of having these values, I'll create the bins or categories. I'll call it as, okay, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, 41 to 50, 51 to 60. So what are these? These are all the bins. And I'm going to say it as in which group does these values are belonging to. That's what we call it as binning. In some cases, you might see the people doing the transformation. We call it as log transformation, which is basically a mathematical operation that is done on the data set. In some cases, will perform the one hot encoding. In some cases, will perform some scaling on the data set. It can be standard scaler, it can be normalizer. So, or in some cases, will perform the time series analysis or time series scale fixing. So, here, what I've just mentioned is the various pre-processing that you would generally come across in a machine learning project. Now, by looking at it, I'm sure like if you're from DevOps or other software background, you might be thinking that what exactly are this? So don't worry, it's completely normal if you're seeing this for the first time. And that's what makes the MLOps special. You cannot apply the traditional software practices to the machine learning system, because here the steps that is performed in building the machine learning models is very different than what you would be seeing in a traditional software, and that's what you're seeing right here as well. Only in this pre-processing step itself you're seeing what are the various types of pre-processing that is being applied on the data set. So what it means is, on the other hand, if I'm creating such pipeline, that pipeline in that pipeline we also have to remember what are the pre-processing techniques that is being applied, and we have to follow the same so that we can have a repeatability as well when we are doing the implementation. This is one of the essential aspect of the MLOps, guys. Okay, so in the in any machine learning pipeline, we'll ingest the data, that is I'll get the data from various sources. Then once I get the data from various sources, I'll be saving it with me. Then I'll perform the pre-processing. Now, once I've done the pre-processing, we are going to prepare the features, which is basically the important values in our given data set. Now, to reach these features, we perform the pre-processing, and in this pre-processing step, there can be various ways in which we might have chosen the pre-processing. And all these are the examples of structured data. If I'm dealing with text data, then there can be many other transformations on the data. It can be working with the text, it can be paraphrasing the text, it can be improving the text, maybe generation of vector representation. Or if I'm working with image, maybe I'll resize the image, I'll rotate an image. So this pre-processing is dependent on type of data and also the application in which that we are working. So it's one of the important element in our machine learning pipeline. Now, whenever we are constructing the automated pipeline for our machine learning project, we also have to consider these pre-processing as well. Okay, then what we'll be having right here is, so once we have done the pre-processing, we have done the features. Like we have got the features. Now, using these features, we apply the machine learning model. Now, while choosing the machine learning model, I've mentioned already, depending on the outcome that we want to achieve, it can be classification, regression, clustering, depending on the outcome. This is what we'll be doing. So here, during this training, okay, so there are a few more things that you might come across, and I'm going to share it with you. This is very important, especially when you're working at the enterprise level. So I'll call it as model training step. Okay. So in this model training step, so what we do is we are going to extract the data from the whatever the features that we have got that we have extracted. We will use those features. And over here in the model training step, what we actually do is we will split the data into two parts. One is train step and the test part. We will use this training part for training and we'll use this test part for testing. So it's basically to check whether my model is actually working or not. So that's the key reason, guys. So that's what we are checking right here. We are just checking whether the model is working, whether the model that we have trained, whether it is actually working as per our requirement. So that's called as a training step that we have got. Then we have a test step. So training is basically training the model and testing is just checking whether the model is working or not. Now here in this case, depending on the output, like we actually have a various uh, like metrics that we use it. We have the accuracy, we have the mean squared error, we have the root mean squared error. Like if I'm working with generative application, we will have blue score. So depending on the type of application and the data that we'll be dealing with, the evaluation metric is gonna change. Okay, so this is what we'll be having. Now, once we have performed the training, we'll go ahead and perform the evaluation as I mentioned right here. Now, once this has been done, okay, once the evaluation and training has been done, okay, once the training and evaluation has been done, we are going to deploy it. Now, once we deploy it, that's where the pipeline would come into picture. Once we have the model ready, so what we actually do is in the machine learning projects, we are going to create the pipeline. I'll call it as the MLOps pipeline. So whenever we have the MLOps pipeline, some of the common features that you would come across in this MLOps pipeline is we are going to build the MLOps pipeline using microservices. It can be containers or it can be serverless function. And like another features that you would come across when we have this overall machine learning pipeline is we are going to track the inputs. Now, the reason that we are going to track the inputs because here in this case, the model that we are building is dependent on the data. So we are going to track the inputs. And not only that, once the model has been trained, whatever the values that we have got during the evaluation, we are going to track the outputs as well. I'm going to say track outputs. Now, when I say outputs, it can be anything. It can be model hyperparameters. It can be model file itself, we call it as a model artifact, the model file, or the metrics, the output that we have got, the performance, logs, everything that we are going to track it. Then we will perform the versioning. Now, here is an important aspect, guys. When you think about a general software, we'll only consider the versioning of the code. But in the case of versioning of machine learning pipelines or the machine learning project, we will version data, artifacts, which are used throughout my pipeline. We are going to store the code in Git-based repository. And in order to store the model and the artifacts, we make use of tools such as DVC, that is data version control. Then this pipeline will also have the CI techniques that has been built in, so that once the code has been committed, so it will perform the automation testing. It will also follow the review process, approval process, which is generally being followed in any software application itself. Okay, this is the overall idea of, or this is, I'm going to say these are the various features that we have in any machine learning pipeline. Okay, that's the overall idea here, team. Now, as you can clearly see, in doing each and every element, it's not easy one. And that is the reason to do each and every aspect of it, we have various tools that are available in the market, like to track the inputs, output, hyperparameters, and even to track the experiment, we have the tools such as MLflow, which we actually use it in our MLOps project. And in order to work with microservices, we make use of Docker and Kubernetes. And we also have various platform services as well. And here for performing the versioning, we make use of Git for version control of code, and we make use DVC for version control of model and data artifacts. And for performing the testing, we make use of the same testing principles that we have used, but this is specific to the machine learning model, like testing for data drift and the other aspects. And CI tool, it's the same CI tool, but that is adjusted for the machine learning project. And once the CI has been built in, we also have a CD as well, which is nothing but the continuous deployment. Here, the deployment will be on the endpoint. So we'll go ahead and deploy this models that we have got into a compute system, which can go ahead and serve the request that is coming in. Okay, so there are various ways in which we can perform the deployment, but that's the overall idea about the implementation of the machine learning pipeline. And here, when it comes to deployment, now post that, we also have the monitoring, which I've highlighted earlier. So in the case of monitoring, we have like we actually look into the bias. We'll also look into the performance of the model. We'll look into the data drift. We'll look into the challenges in the model performance. We will look into the business KPIs. We will look into the infrastructure. We will look into the anomaly detection in the data set. So these are all the additional aspects that we consider when we are monitoring these machine learning systems. Okay. Now, while monitoring to check these diff and similar scenarios, we have various tests, like we call it as statistics test. We have KS test, and we have KL test. That the another one is Jensen Shannon divergence test. So like this, we have Z test, the variance test. So these are all the various statistical tests that we use it in order to monitor how well my machine learning model is performing on a production scenario. Okay. So in order to do this entire end-to-end hands-on, we actually have two methods, guys. One, I can make use of open source tools, or I can also make use of cloud platforms as well. Like for examples, in the AWS, we have Amazon AI, AWS AI SageMaker. In Azure, we have Azure Machine Learning. In GCP, we have Vertex AI. So these are all the various cloud platforms that we have got. And even in Alibaba Cloud, we have the similar platform. We're using this platform where I can go ahead and perform this end-to-end MLOps cycle. Or we can also make use of various open source tools which are available in the market so that we can build on top of it and have better control and reduce the dependency over the vendor. So this is how we actually implement the MLOps principles at the enterprise level. So overall, in order to implement this MLOps principles, first thing is we need to be aware of ML pipeline. It basically consists of various stages, and we track each and every stage in an efficient manner. And to perform those tracking and to implement the DevOps principles on this machine learning projects, we use this MLOps as a way to do it. And to do that, we have open source tools and we also have the cloud platforms as well. Okay, that's the core foundations that I wanted you to have about this MLOps and how everything would work. Now, in the next session, what we will do is we will go ahead and get started with a simple approach of an MLOps project and understand how do we work in any typical project. So that's going to help you to get a full structure about this MLOps, guys. So I'll take a pause here. If you've got any question, let me know in the chat window. And whatever the notes that I've prepared, yes, you can actually scan this QR code and register to our platform. And so you'll be able to see it once the session is completed. You'll be able to see the sessions recording as well as the notes, whatever the notes that I've just written right here. I'll attach it as a PDF. And for those of you for your benefit, I'll also share you the link here in the chat window so that you can uh, take a reference of it. Okay. Now, apart from that, if you have got any other questions, let me know, team. Okay. And also, folks, I highly recommend you to connect. I think once you are on our platform, so I highly recommend you to be part of our WhatsApp community as well, so that you'll get to know more about our session updates as and when we continue to do it. So the next session is planned to do it on tomorrow. So you will be able to see it on our YouTube channel. And for the next session going forward, we'll also share you the Zoom link so that you can also ask questions through the Zoom link so that it's easier for you. So we'll be sharing those updates on our WhatsApp community. I'm just sharing the link over here in the chat window for our WhatsApp community. Just stay with us on the WhatsApp community so that you can get the session updates. All right, guys. Now, if you have got any question, please feel free to let me know. So let me know your questions in the chat window, guys. Okay, I don't see any questions right here. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, for joining in, and do stay in touch and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more such live updates, and we'll continue further. Okay, Manny says, could you write three secrets? So, okay. So that was just to reconfirm. So based on the request that we have got, like we've decided not to take that simple three steps or simple three secrets. We've decided to give a deep dive into MLOps. Okay. So we just went ahead and understood the three, like deep dive into the MLOps. As you progress, we'll be sharing those in detail. Okay. So if I want to share you the three secrets at a very high level, which is already covered, but still let me answer that. Okay. So the secrets is simple. The first secret is creation of the machine learning code using the microservices. And the second step is deployment, which basically comes right here, the creation of microservices, which takes care of the correct ML pipeline, deployment, and monitoring. These are the three simple steps that we need to do it in order to build the MLOps project. So I recommend you to just go through the session from start. You'll be getting the clear ideas. Okay. Thank you so much, team. Any other questions, team? Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And we also have a live bootcamp that's going on. If you're someone who prefers to learn through the instructor-led program, do check out our bootcamp where I'll be taking you through end to end in our bootcamp, which is an instructor-led bootcamp. I'll take you through from scratch, including the Python foundations and machine learning operation. Go ahead and check out. We still have few seats left. If you're someone who's intending to learn through me through the instructor-led session, I'll be happy to help you in your learning journey. So again, I wish to seeing you on our next community session. Stay in touch with us. I wish you all the very best, guys, and I'll see you next time on our next session update. We'll continue further in this MLOps journey that we have started. Okay, stay in touch, and more importantly, thank you for joining in and share it with as many folks as possible so that everyone can get the benefit of this MLOps. There's a huge demand that we see it in the industry right now. It's across India and outside India as well. So let everyone be benefited. And I wish you all the very best, guys, for your MLOps journey. Take care and stay in touch. We'll keep you posted. Bye, guys.